The Phoenix Suns have clinched a playoff spot officially. They beat down the Miami Heat, handed it right back to them after a blowout earlier in the month. Aaron Edwards is here for a special recap edition of this show, and we will break down what the finals matchup between these two teams might look like coming up on Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons and a contributor at Suns.com as well as Dime Magazine. Thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen each and every day. You can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We are everywhere, and we are free. The best way to keep us that way is to subscribe, to follow along wherever you are, and to tell every single Suns fan in your life to do the same. We have a big show, mostly because I'm pretty giddy after that win. Aaron Edwards is here. The Suns just won 111-90 over the Miami Heat. Aaron, we usually start off these recap shows with just kind of our big takeaway. What's on your mind after watching national TV? No Chris Paul, Devin Booker returns, and the Suns come away with a big W.
It was really like they did a lot of the stuff that I needed them to do. Like the 3-point shooting is going to come, I think. We're kind of streaky when it comes to that. But rebounding, we finally started to rebound. And Bam had like 3 at one point late in the game. And that was just an insane stat to me. So as long as like we're rebounding, I think that we're just going to be tough to beat. And you can tell that that was just like a really big focus right now.
I mean, I think Ayton had 8 in the second half. I believe at halftime, Ayton had 2 rebounds, both defensive, and it was really JaVale who was leading the way. The Heat couldn't rebound all night, so they were still ahead overall, but you see Ayton get that double-double. JaVale finishes with 11 points, 15 rebounds. Last night, it was Jay Crowder who was leading the way, aside from Ayton with, I think, 11. Bridges tonight, though, had 9, and then Booker had 8. So it was never just going to be DeAndre Ayton. It's not always going to be like Game 3 of the conference finals where he had like 20 and no one else could do anything. It's not going to be like that. It's most nights it's everybody, and so that was great to see. That's exactly kind of where I think we got to go, because it's a part of my bigger takeaway, which is just the defense overall. So in this game, Miami had an 89.4 offensive rating. They scored 89 points per 100 possessions if you were to break it out over the full season. Miami's offensive rating for the year is 113.9. They are the 7th best offense in the NBA. Now, the Suns didn't have Chris. Miami didn't have Jimmy Butler. So obviously that's kind of their primary cog on offense when he's healthy. But still, I mean, they held a potent offense to just completely uncharacteristic night. And not only did they do that, but it was like night and day from the first half to the second half. It felt like the Heat were getting whatever they wanted on offense most of that first half. And then the second half, the Suns just completely put the clamps down.
Yeah, like on defense, they started to finally get out to the shooters. And even like more than that, it just like Suns just do better in free-flowing games when the refs don't really like stop the games. Even if nobody's getting calls, I think the Suns are the best team in the league. Like, I just think if the refs are just playing it tough and nobody's getting what they want, then the Suns are just better overall to handle just a game like that. And the refs kind of swallowed their whistles tonight. And I just really think in games where refs swallow their whistles, the Suns are just going to come out a lot better than most teams.
Yeah, the Suns' ideal game is like 10 total free throws.
Yeah.
Like 5 on each side, just like a crisp, like 2-hour and 5-minute basketball game, no stoppages. I completely agree with you. And that is what we got in the second half a little bit more, whereas in that first half, it just felt like everything was coming up Miami. Like that game in the first half was a like quintessential Miami Heat basketball game. It was kind of physical in a weird way where it never felt like it had a lot of rhythm. They were generating threes. They were, keeping the Suns out of their offense, all that type of stuff. And then in the second half, especially, I feel like that sort of kick-out game from the Heat just went away. I think, that they only scored 35 points as a team in the second half.
Jeez.
And Duncan Robinson was 0 of 3, which actually, no, he took a few after I stopped paying attention. He was 1 of 4 from deep in the second half. And the 1 is obviously like the important part because he made 5 in the first half, but the 4 is almost as important. Just stop being a factor for the Heat. Like, so much of that two-man game between Bam and Robinson was working, and Kyle Lowry was getting guys hit ahead in transition. Tyler Hero was, in his step-back rhythm and all that stuff. Literally nothing worked in the second half for him.
Yeah, they were getting some really, open, just really, miscommunications on defense shots and not getting out on the pick and roll. And, we texted about, they were really screening well and nobody was coming to help on those threes. And in the second half, they were it was somebody in their face every time they came off the screen. And they were having to shoot some really tough threes. And I'd rather them make tough threes than wide open ones. And they just didn't make those tough ones.
Yeah, the other part of this, and we can talk about Ayton a little bit more in the next segment, just when we go through some of the positives that were working in the Suns' favor, big picture. But just thinking about the defense, I don't remember another game where Deandre Ayton outplayed Bam. Most nights, I'm just going to be honest, as somebody who generally wants the best for the Suns, even if I don't necessarily always call myself a fan with a capital F, most nights against the Heat during DeAndre Ayton's career have been a reminder of would it be nice to have Bam Adebayo on our team, right? That's usually what the deal is. But in this game, Ayton took it to him. Like you said, Bam was really quiet most of the night. He finishes with a decent stat line, but you hardly noticed him outside of some passes to guys like Robinson and Hero.
Yeah, because our guards and our forwards were getting rebounds over them, and it was just starting breaks. And that's kind of how you want to initiate your offense, is not your center having to get it to a guard or anything. We just crashed the boards hard enough that we made him pretty non-existent, because he was mostly just running back to get on defense to get back in order. They were kind of just discombobulated on defense because our Bridges was getting so many rebounds and Crowder, and our offense is going at that point, and he was having to work so much harder on defense than I think he's used to. Yeah,
he was definitely having to work hard. The Suns have been so good about ball movement and pulling the defense in different directions since Paul has been out, just working together as a team. But also, just to keep his energy from being a factor, I think is really impressive too. He's a guy right now averaging 19 and 10. So he had 17 and 6. He was considerably less effective than he normally is. And just kind of zooming out a little bit too, when it comes to the rebounding, to have his effort not be a factor on the offensive boards is pretty incredible. The Heat only had 6 offensive rebounds. That's really been the area where teams have been killing the Suns. Defensive rebounding, to me, it's most of that's just going to be, if the Suns miss a lot of shots, there's going to be more defensive rebounds to go around, right? When you say a team has a rebounding problem, most of the time that's going to come down to they give up offensive rebounds, and the Heat only had 6. 4 of those were PJ Tucker, who's not really a putback threat. He's a guy who's going to kick them back out for you. So for Bam to have 0 is pretty impressive. So let's actually pick back up on the Ayton topic when we come back from a break. I want to talk about just what it's meant to this team to have him step up the way that he has. But first, guys, today's show brought to you by a new sponsor, Athletic Greens. We have been sampling Athletic Greens here at the Locked On Podcast Network, and I can honestly say that it's pretty delicious. It's surprisingly good. I'm not going to lie. I have had bad history with things like this in the past. You feel is it really going to taste good? Is it really going to do what it's supposed to do? I'm starting to feel the effects. I'm not going to lie. That's probably going to take a little bit longer, but the taste has been there from the jump. It's a little bit sweet. It's a little bit citrusy. And it's super easy. You just mix it up first thing in the morning, maybe right when you get home from work, maybe right before or after a workout, if that's already kind of in your habit. And it's easy. You just shake it up, down it. It's like any other like protein shake or anything else. It's 8 to 10, 12 ounces. Just power it down, and there you go. It's lifestyle friendly. So whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, anything, it works for you. It's all really vitamins in there and just a little bit of flavoring. No nasty chemicals or GMOs. And in addition to having vitamin D, vitamin C, all that good stuff that you need, it also is packed with chemicals that'll support mental clarity, alertness, things like that. And it costs you less than $3 a day, probably the most important part. You buy a big pack, a big jar, whatever it is, you dump a little bit a day, and over the course of a year or a month or whatever you decide to pay for, it pays for itself. It is very much something that you make into your habit, put it together, and it pays off. Over 7,000 5-star reviews recommended by professional athletes as well as leading health experts, and of course, your lovely Locked On hosts. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition, especially as we continue through flu season. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. No need for a million different pills and supplements. Just take A1 from Athletic Greens. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NBA network. That's all one word. Again, athleticgreens.com/NBA network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Today's show, guys, also brought to you by BetOnline. It's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all scores, podcasts, and news throughout the tournament and beyond. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and even your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action across the sports landscape. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Deandre Ayton, I mentioned 19 and 10. To me, Aaron, if you're just looking at this back-to-back especially, but even extending back to that Milwaukee game where he had 30, this has been a pretty strong week from Deandre Ayton. There was a long time there where it felt like he just couldn't get in rhythm. He would just be invisible some nights. He looked not like himself, but, you know, at the best time, this is similar to what I feel like happened last year where March into April, he was really rounding into form. So how are you feeling about DA? Do you feel like we're seeing playoff DA? Is there another level he could get to? What do you think?
I like that he's doing it without Chris Paul. Like, I think it just gives Monty a whole new kind of lineup configuration he can use in the playoffs. And because, like, Chris Paul can get anybody 10 and 10. And so, like, Ayton doing well with Chris Paul is, like, one of those things that he has to do if he wants to be taken serious at all. But being able to do it without Chris Paul, because Cam Payne's kind of figuring out how to get him the ball in different angles and the easiest shot he can get. And the fact that he's just doing all of this while the team's kind of figuring stuff out, like, you can really tell that he's actually a really good hooper. And it's going to come in handy in the playoffs when maybe Bonnie wants to do like a just DA on the floor lineup and figure out what point guards out there just to like give the rest of the guys a rest. And that would just like help the team out a lot, knowing that he could go to that if he wants.
Yeah, and I think the other part when you're talking about lineups and matchups and things like that was impressive tonight is, again, another team that this is part of, I think, what made me think about the playoffs a little bit is the Heat play pretty small. They didn't really go to PJ at the 5 like the Bucks did, or the Rockets have or whatever. They pretty much stuck to Bam or Dedmon, and then Yurtseven closed out for the last few minutes of the game. But when they switched, when there was a smaller guy in the area, Ayton was really decisive and aggressive about getting the ball and taking advantage of that. So that's important because it's so tempting watching games like this, at least from my perspective, where it's like, man, what if we put Ish Wainwright out there or if Torrey Craig was out there at the 5? Like you just find, like, to me at least, like I get in that mode where I'm like, match the small ball. And then you trust Monty, I guess, and over the course of the game, it's like, all right, no, I remember that's why Deandre Ayton is on this team. That's why he's good. It's why he matters. Like, you kind of remember, you have to trick yourself into it a little bit, but that's really big, is that he's still able to punish small teams, and it's going to have to be the case in the playoffs because they're gonna see that type of stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Ayton kind of doesn't ever make the same mistake twice. Like with last year when Harden just tore him apart in that one game when we were up by like 20. And this year he just, like, I thought Monty was going to take him out because he remembered that, but he just got much better at like his distance and his feet. And he kind of like took James Harden out of the game when we played them that last time. So I just think like he's still growing and he's still super young. And like every year it seems like he learned something new, and he just always capitalizes on mistakes that he had previously.
Happy birthday to Deandre Ayton's son as well. I didn't give the young man a shout out when I recorded last, but cool. You just were talking about growing and getting older and whatever. Like, I can't help but think that experience for him, like, it must have had an impact. Like, I'm not gonna get like too into the depths of his brain with that stuff, but like the maturity, all that, like, I can't imagine that hurts, like, I'm sure there's some part of him where he's like, all right, stop goofing around here. Like, you have something else to be playing for now.
Yeah. And just having like we talked about this before, just having kind of the most grown up young vets on his team ever. Like, Book is still extremely young and everybody calls him an old man. Cam Johnson's older than him, and Book just seems like he's 40. And I just think having dudes like that around just changes. Like, Book doesn't have kids, but having a kid plus having somebody as mature as Book around just kind of probably makes you switch it up a little bit.
Yeah, let's hope that getting into this type of rhythm right at the right time will be the same sort of boost for DA that it was last year, because he really started to turn it around in the last few weeks of the regular season last year and turn that into a strong playoff. So seems like it could be the same trajectory now. Maybe that's just going to become kind of the pattern for him, but we'll have to see. I don't want to discount the fact that Book, in his first game back from the COVID protocol, had a 20-plus point near triple-double, but unfortunately he has raised the bar for himself. So I don't feel like it even is worth, including him among the like honorable mentions that we're doing. But I do want to talk about Cam Payne. That was the other big story from this game. He had another double-double, 11 and 10. He was way more efficient than his final line will show because he started to miss some shots late. But even besides that, he lands on PJ Tucker's foot with about 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. Looked like he dinged his left ankle pretty bad, sprain or something, goes to the locker room, and then eventually comes back to close out the game. I don't know if he's going to play in the next game. Part of me wonders if the adrenaline just got him through tonight and he wanted to get the win. But still very gutty. He went and got the block on Duncan Robinson in the corner right after he hurt himself. Like, there was, to me, once I, saw him at least be able to move around, I felt like there was no way he wasn't going to close out the game.
Yeah, that was another thing that I wanted to make sure was going to be right before the playoffs, because he put the Lakers away almost by himself for a couple of games when he was coming off the bench, hitting like 3 threes a game and just kind of just making games insurmountable. And we need that to come off the bench. Cam Johnson's obviously a different person now, so I think our bench in general is just a lot different. We have a center again, but I just think, like, if we want to really put teams away, we need a lot of what we got from our bench last year. And he's just been playing really tough, and he hasn't really had that lag that I thought he'd have because he didn't play a lot of games. So I thought he would start off a lot slower, but he's just came out really fast and really strong.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if, with a lot of guys doing that, and I think even Cam Johnson being out right now, it just seems like there's more and more evidence that the Suns are playing things extremely slowly when it comes to injuries, like not rushing guys back at all. You even heard Frank Kaminsky apparently could be back before the end of the regular season, and he's just in that sort of rehab, recovery, conditioning phase. I don't think Johnson would be missing these games if it was the playoffs. Like, to me, it seems like those extra few nights that Payne missed coming out of the All-Star break, that might have just been like, let's make absolutely sure this guy is not going to re-injure himself and just has his win back before we put him out there, because he definitely has hit the ground running. I hope tonight can be a little bit of a springboard for him to get his shot right, because he was pretty efficient before the ankle thing and everything else. And he's been talking about how frustrated he's been just not seeing the ball go in. So hopefully tonight can be a step in the right direction there. Okay, normally we will close out with recap segment, the silly things that I do at the end of games. But tonight, because it's the Heat, because Aaron is here, and we won't see Miami again, I wanted to just kind of talk about this potential finals matchup. They're such a new team. We really only have this one game to go off of, so we'll dive into that. First, though, guys, today's show brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's pretty difficult to walk into a chain auto parts store, let alone a dealership, and expect to get what you want at a fair price. So save time and money and switch to Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for only over 20 years. They've also been doing it online that entire time, so they know what it takes to make things smooth, simple, and cheap for the online customer. Prices are reliably low, and they have everything you could possibly want. Brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet to refurbish. Is that the right word? Refurbish your front or back of your vehicle. And they make it easy, like I said. So all you got to do, go to rockauto.com, type the car in that you have, scroll down to the part that you need, click purchase, and it's at your door within days. So go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Okay, so the Suns frankly scared everybody, I think, the last time that they played the Heat. I saw people after that game, I would say, like, oh, the Bucks are still, the worst matchup, or wow, Brooklyn has so much talent, Philly's going to be. And I always can count on people in my mentions on Twitter saying, no, the Heat are the team to be worried about. Because I think people were so nervous about that 20-point loss, I think it was in January, to this team, Aaron, that I think it put the fear of God in Suns fans. Now this has been completely flipped. So we're getting basically two polar opposite games to go off of if we're judging what this matchup could look like come the NBA Finals. What do you think? Is this a good matchup, a bad matchup? Do we not know? How are you feeling?
I was at that game, and I didn't learn anything from it. They got a lot of foul calls and they made a lot of threes. None of that stuff really translates to playoff basketball if it comes down to that, because the whistles get tighter and it's just those shots that you usually make. You start to tighten up and they just get a lot harder to make. So, yeah, I wasn't really worried about that first game, but in this one, it just, I don't know, we still haven't been at full strength, so I don't really know what to expect. I know how Monty coaches, and he makes really good adjustments, and so does Spoelstra. They're both really good coaches, so I know just the series in general would just be just a fight because both these coaches learn and are smart. So that's probably the only thing I can take away from it is it's two really good coaches and they'll make adjustments. So it would just be a dogfight, and I think it would definitely go 7.
The things that scare me about Miami, and I would probably put them either a 1B or a very close 2 behind Milwaukee in terms of scariest matchups. Part of that's because I just don't really know what to expect from Philadelphia or Brooklyn, and I don't know if I should trust this Celtics thing as far as actually thinking about them that way. So, it's part of it is they're two sure things. These are the two teams who've been in the finals for the East the past 2 years. I know what I'm getting from these guys, but the reason that they freak me out if I'm a Suns fan is depth. They have, I feel like every single guy, if they pulled Haywood Highsmith off the bench in a game 5 of the finals, I'd be yep, 15 points. It's about to happen. Haslam can come out. I worry about pretty much everybody because of their system and their player development and whatever. The threes you talked about, the Suns, they have a lot of shooters, but they're not the best of the best in the NBA in terms of creating threes and making a ton of them. Like, they're not a team that's necessarily going to go off for 20 threes in a game very often, whereas Miami is. And then versatility, like with the depth is kind of the same thing there, but they can play big, they can play small, they can, put all offense out there, they can put really tight defense out there. And almost every single one of their best players, actually, I will say every one of their best players except for Hero, is a two-way player between Butler, Lowry, and Bam. Like, all three guys play both ends. So you can't really take advantage of them. That's why I think so many of their games are played on their terms, because there's not really a weakness. Like, even if the threes aren't falling, like, if Butler's healthy, it's like, all right, give the ball to Jimmy and he'll do something with it, right? Like, they just don't have something to poke at, and that's part of what scares me. It's just tough over a 7-game series to know what to go at.
Yeah, like, they are like well and even rounded, but after the Milwaukee series, we watched Giannis go for 50 and a triple double in a closeout game. So I just don't think anybody strikes that kind of fear in me. Like, he was doing whatever he wanted. He was a generational player, and I just don't think they're putting a generational player on the floor like that. And I think Monty can handle it. He threw everything he could at Giannis, and he just couldn't do anything. He was just the best player in the world at that point. And I just don't think that kind of speed bump would hit if we played them. They're not going to put a Giannis on the floor that can defend literally everybody, that can get to the rim whenever he wants, that's making 85% of his free throws out of nowhere. Like, I just don't think any of those things can happen at the same time again.
No, I mean, when the other teams in the East have Embiid, KD, and who am I forgetting? Giannis, who you're just talking about. That's a very good example, I think, of why the Heat are. I mean, it's why they're such a weird team to try to judge in general, let alone like how they match up with the Suns. They don't have that guy. Jimmy was about as close to being that type of guy when they were in the finals in the bubble, but it makes it tough to think through. Monty, I'm seeing on Twitter, just said post-game that he told the team after the win tonight that this was one of the best defensive performances he's ever seen in his NBA career, which is, it felt that way. I can definitely say that. Monty's seen a lot more basketball than me, so it feels a little bigger coming out of his mouth. But with that said, I'm curious what you think as far as matchups, because I was thinking about this, like, when Duncan Robinson was getting hot in that first half, I was like, at some point you put Mikal on him, and you just make Kyle Lowry turn into a scorer a little bit. Like, they were almost giving Lowry a little bit too much respect by putting Mikal on him, in my opinion, because he wasn't looking to score. So it's like, what are you really getting out of that? So again, some of that's the Heat being so weird. But if Jimmy's healthy, how would you line things up? Does Mikal guard Jimmy? And then, who guards Lowry? Who guards Robinson? Who guards Hero? Like, how would you see that stuff breaking down?
I think Mikal still guards Jimmy, or they might put Book on him. I think they would just honestly, finally, like, just ask Book, like, this is your challenge right here. You're going to have to be the guy for this series. Because there's going to be some series like that where he has to be the guy. And even like the Milwaukee one, like, he had to guard a lot of dudes that were hot. Like, the whole team was hot, but Booker had like a lot of tough defensive assignments during that playoff stretch. And I just pretty much think that they would tell him either you want to go head up with Jimmy or you want to go head up with Murray. But I think Chris Paul and Lowry are a wash. Like, they both kind of do the same thing, but like in a different way. I think they're both just going to kind of just flop each other out of the series kind of thing. And I just think they both play so similar that they would just be a wash. And it would really just come down to Booker, like how he defends and at the same time gets his own shots.
We definitely saw, I think, tonight how the Suns can take away some of that three-point stuff. I mean, part of it's just focus. And I think some of it too is like a lot different to play them one night randomly in March versus a 7-game series where you know what to be ready for off the ball, because it feels like, even to me watching, it feels so random. Like, how can you possibly keep track of where Robinson and Hero are going when it's this way, it's that way. There's a screen out of nowhere. It feels, at their best, it can feel a little bit, Warriors-like. But I think over 7 games, you notice the patterns. You know what to adjust for. You put the right guys on them. You know when to switch versus when not to switch. So that stuff doesn't worry me as much. And I think making Lowry a little bit more into a scorer would be something that would be a clear adjustment. He hasn't really had to do that many nights this season for them, at least, just seeing box scores of theirs and watching them here and there. That's not really been his game, but make him do that. And I think your point, though, at the end of the day is, aside from just the Heat, is super spot on, because last year putting Book defensively on somebody who was hot was like a last minute thing, right? A last resort. Like, okay, it's game 5, Book, go guard Chris Middleton. Like, let's try it. And now I think it'll be because Book will be ready for it, because Monty might have a little bit more trust in him, and just because he's been getting better. That'll be quicker, right? You could see him starting series off guarding a legitimate offensive weapon, rather than like, let's feel this out. Like, it's going to be like you're saying, like, all right, Book, guard Jimmy. And like, maybe you adjust away from that eventually. And there's so much switching and whatever. Like, I get that. But I think that's a good point. It'll be different this year as far as how Monty approaches that stuff.
Yeah, I think like he can try just so many different weird lineups now. He just didn't have kind of the bodies last year. He didn't have enough big bodies. And Aaron Holiday I don't think he knows how tall anyone is, because he plays everyone the same. Like, he doesn't realize he's the smallest person on the court sometimes. So I can see him just giving Robinson fits or giving Hero fits and just annoying the hell out of them for 7 games. Like, I can see Monty thinking that just having him be his brother for a series and just stress you out for 7 games just would work. And I think that he would try some stuff like that out.
I think Holiday's probably already the Suns' second best point of attack defender besides McHale. Like, he's better than Payne, I think. It's not any, criticism of Chris Paul, but at this point, that's not really what Chris is doing. And Book, like, I think he's a little better isolating and things like that, rotating, but having to fight through screens isn't really his game. And so I think Holiday's like already up there. So that's another weapon they'll have. I think you're completely right. They'll just have more weapons and bodies. And we'll see what happens in terms of who's healthy by then, Chris, whatever. That'll be a conversation for a different time. But it would be a fun series. I think I'm more rooting for it not to be the Bucks, not just because they scare me, but also I don't know. I'm always like, I want to see new. Like, I don't want the Suns to play anybody they played last year. I just want to see new stuff, because I'm like, I don't know. I like watching different games and matchups than I don't really want to see like.
Except the Lakers. I like seeing the Lakers fans sad. So I kind of would rather them do that again.
That's fair. That's fair. I guess really I'm just saying I don't want to see the Clippers again, because they piss me off.
Yeah.
But that'll wrap us up, guys. It should be a fun series if this happens. It should be a fun rest of the regular season. I'll have one more show actually talking about the Lakers. There's a few like connections between the Suns and the Lakers that haven't gotten looked at closely enough. So might bring a guest on, might not. We'll see. But that'll be tomorrow's show. He is Aaron Edwards. You can follow his work at AllCapsNBA over on the Take Line YouTube channel. Support that show. They do great work over there. And I will be back with you guys tomorrow. Like I said, thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen. Now go make Locked On NBA your second listen to catch up on everything you might have missed around the association tonight.